The Environmental Protection Agency's Central Data Exchange is its key user interface for collecting and reporting data on over 30 EPA programs. But when they started to see strange usernames, they knew they had a problem. Joining me to share what they discovered and what they did is the Audit Director for EPA's Office of Inspector General, Michelle Wicker. Ms. Wicker, thank you so much for joining me in studio today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, let's start with a basic description of what EPA's Central Data Exchange is and why it matters.
Oh, thank you. The Central Data Exchange is also known as CDX. CDX is a system that businesses, states, and tribes can submit their environmental data to the EPA. The CDX has over 30 systems that it feeds information to. So let me give you an example. Okay, so one of the tools that CDX feeds information to is the Water Contamination Information Tool. So I'm from the state of North Carolina, and last fall we had a hurricane, and when we did, it was a lot of flooding. Okay, the Water Contamination Tool, it helps the public health agencies with contamination. They keep up with the contamination of the water. So when that flooding happened, the public health agencies would use a tool like CDX and go through the Water Contamination Tool in order to report the information to the EPA. So it's a very important system.
And so it collects information across all of EPA's various programs.
So if you look at our report, it's over 30 program services that are connected to CDX. So you come in through CDX, and then you go into over 30 program services.
So why is it so important that the data in there remains secure?
Yeah, absolutely. The reason you want the data to be secured is because EPA runs reports out of this data. Like, for example, the toxic release inventory is one of the systems. So, they will need to have a database where they can look at what's going on with the toxics in different areas, businesses. And one other thing is when you look at IT security, sometimes hackers will use one system as an entry point. So let's say they come in through CDX. We don't know what other systems this hacker or malicious person could get to. So you want to make sure you have security on your network and your systems.
So this is the repository of the data that EPA uses to report compliance with all of its different programs.
Yes, and they run different kind of reports out of those 30 systems. But like I said, you come in through CDX. That is what they call the gateway or the entry point, and then it feeds to over 30 systems.
So what prompted you to do a deep dive analysis of the CDX security?
So the Office of Audit received an audit referral from the Office of Investigations, our OIG Office of Investigations, and we actually received 3. And within those 3, one specifically stated that over 100 international users were granted access to the CDX without going through EPA's verification process. And so we looked at the referrals, and what my team and I did, we decided we need to do an audit of the internal controls for CDX. Go in, gain an understanding of the system, look at the internal controls. And when we did that, the first thing we wanted to do, we wanted to pick a sample of users or people that use the CDX system, like the businesses. And when we went to do that, it's 195,000 businesses or users that use the system. And so when we did that, we started looking at the data. And we would see users like A, B, C, D, E, F, G as a first name or last name A, 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 A. And we just started seeing some real questionable things in the data set. We partnered with our data analytics team because we want to pick what they call like a statistical sample because we have domestic users and international users. And so when we did that, that's when we came up with one of our findings as far as the data reliability of the CDX system.
So you had a warning up front that there might be some problems.
Yes, we did.
And you weren't expecting those AAAAA names, right?
No, I don't know anybody named AAAA or ABCDEFG or last name ABCDEFG. So when you read our report, that is not a typo. That is actually what we saw in the system.
So let's talk a little bit more about your findings as you got into the report. Mm-hmm. I would expect that there's some kind of process, some verification, some internal control that's on the front end that keeps those folks out. What was happening?
So some of the things that we found with the audit was we found a lack of a control to prevent someone from putting in A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We also found that there were some vulnerabilities on the network for over 2 years, which the agency is working to fix those as we speak. Those are being fixed. We also found that So you have users on your account, and if users aren't on your system and they haven't used the system in, let's say, over 45 days, the agency is supposed to disable those accounts. We found over 100,000 that weren't being disabled timely in accordance with the policy. And so those are some things that should be done. We also interviewed a lot of the people, like over 50 people that grant the access to the system. And so we found that training was an issue. So that's an easy fix, is to go in and train the people that grant the access to the system.
I'm speaking with Michelle Wicker. She's the audit director with the Environmental Protection Agency's Office of Inspector General. So just really sort of a breakdown in processes, or were there no processes to follow?
The agency has processes to follow. There was a change during the pandemic. There was a change in the processes, and everyone wasn't trained properly. And so what the agency is doing there, they're working to update their processes and make sure everyone across the board is trained.
This sounds like an issue that many other agencies could relate to, not only in the process breakdowns and the change during COVID, but getting everything back on track now. So what were your recommendations? How should EPA be moving forward with this, and what are you expecting?
Yes. So in our report, we had 14 recommendations. And so with that, just a high level of the recommendations is to disable unverified accounts. So if the A, B, C, D, E, F, G is not a verified account, to disable that account. We also want them to disable inactive accounts in accordance with their policy. We also want to, the report, what we highlight in the report is for them to train the people that grant the access to the system, and then also update your policies to match your current procedures. So although your procedures change, just to update the policies to be in line with the current procedures.
Did the issues that you found ultimately have any impact on the reliability of EPA's program reporting and compliance?
They could. We did not look at the final reports that EPA issues, but because we saw users like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, it does lead us to believe that there could be some issues with the reports, but we did not go to that level of detail.
And did you find any evidence that hackers had migrated from CDX into any of the other of EPA systems?
No, we did not find any evidence of that. We did look for that, but the system was not logging the activity. It would log in when someone accessed the system, but it did not log where they navigated through on the network.
Was that one of your recommendations, that kind of follow-up should be instigated?
No, we didn't make that recommendation. We really want them to, the report highlights that we would like for them to disable unverified accounts. So if that person is not a legitimate user of the system and you haven't gone through the proper verification process, that account should be disabled. And they should decide what they need to do for monitoring on their side.
So how did EPA's leadership respond to your recommendations?
So out of the 14 recommendations, the agency agreed with 7, and they provided pending corrective actions. And what we do is we work with the agency, and they will submit us documentation to the OIG, and we will review it to determine if those actions have been completed. The other recommendations, we're currently working with the agency now to make sure those recommendations get resolved. So we work hand in hand with the agency, and they will provide supporting documentation to the OIG before we close those recommendations.
What about the other 7?
As I stated, the other 7, we're working with the agency now.
Okay.
So they will work with us. But right now, they're considered unresolved. And so we work with the agency. Basically, what they said in the report is that they've already done those actions. So they will submit us documentation, and they will tell us what they have done, and we'll decide if we can close those recommendations.
Got it. Are you going to schedule a follow-up, go back and kind of look and make sure that they've done all the things they promised to do?
At this time, we don't have a follow-up schedule. We'll just track where they are with closing the recommendations. With 14, it could take a little bit of time to close those, and we may schedule a follow-up at a later date, but we don't have one scheduled at this time.
Well, clearly this is a really important database, and the Trump administration's been gathering and collecting databases kind of across the administration. How do you feel about the security of the CDX at this point? Is it ready to go, rock and roll, or are you still looking at perhaps glitches and other connection points?
I believe once the agency implements our recommendations, the ones in the report, it will strengthen the security of the CDX system. And they're in the process of doing that now. They do want to correct the issues that we identify in the report. And I think if you read the report, they agree with 7 of the recommendations, and the other 7, they're saying they've already made those actions. We're just waiting to close those out.